Hello and welcome to our Voices in Montessori podcast, brought to you by the Greenspring Center for Lifelong Learning. Please subscribe to our podcast so that we can continue to support your important work. As Dr. Montessori tells us, an education capable of saving humanity is no small undertaking. We agree, so let's get to work. I'm Tamara Sheesley Balis, and in today's episode, we're talking about how we can support students' connection to the natural world and why it is so important. My guest today is Linda Englehart. Linda spent the first years of her life on a farm and minored in biology and majored in classical humanities at Kent State University. She then completed her Montessori certification for the primary level and was hired at Ruffing Montessori School, a distinguished school in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. They sponsored further training for the elementary level at the internationally renowned Montessori Training Center in Bergamo, Italy. Linda earned her MED from Endicott College with a focus on children and their relationship with the natural world. She's especially interested in nurturing biophilia in young children as she sees that as critical to the future stewardship of our planet. Her master's thesis on children and nature was nationally recognized and published by the American Montessori Society. Over the decades, Linda has designed educational programs, taught primary, elementary, and middle school, and served as a school leader. Additionally, she has mentored Montessori teachers and presented at local, national, and international Montessori conferences. Currently semi-retired, she continues to work part-time on the faculty of the Institute for Educational Studies, referred to as TIES, as a seminar facilitator and mentor. Linda enjoys serving on the board at the Evergreen Naturalists and Audubon Society and volunteering at the Evergreen Nature Center. So welcome, Linda. We are so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for being here. I think that this topic is one of the most important topics that any of us can be addressing as educators, as parents, as families. And I just so appreciate you being here to share all of this with us.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Tamara. I'm happy to share some ideas with you today.
So I have to tell you, Linda is my advisor and my master's program at TIES. So this is extra special for me to get to have you here today because we've been working together for almost a year now. And so let me just ask you, what motivated you to do research into children and nature and that connection?
Well, Tamara, growing up in farm country myself, I took for granted that close contact with nature was just a key part of childhood. And every generation is shaped by their childhood. And it becomes easy to believe that childhood remains the same over the years, even when it has changed. But when I was a Montessori guide in a middle school program, I became concerned to see evidence of a disconnect from, sometimes even a disregard for the natural world in some of our students. And for instance, we'd go on extended school outings, like a week at a time. And our staff was challenged sometimes by students who were more concerned by their separation from their electronic devices than enjoying the stunning beauty of the environments we were so fortunate to enjoy. So I wanted to learn more about why this was happening, and these questions arose. Why did some students appear not to appreciate and enjoy nature while others were engaged? How did these attitudes affect their overall well-being? And what have we done and what are we doing to children? How do we help to develop an integrated consciousness and the hearts of our children? And how could we achieve what Walt Whitman aspired to? A quote that is one of my favorites. Now I see the secret of making the best person. It is to grow in the open air and to eat and sleep with the earth.
Is that not the truth? That deep connection that children have to nature, and what a difference. Okay, so you've been doing this for quite a while. What ways has the child's experience of nature changed over time?
Well, let's think back to human history here. Humankind first entered life on the planet in an environment that was rich with diverse life forms, and many of which life forms were far more powerful than the humans. And the human child, out of necessity, learned what sustained life and what did not. So, nature intelligence was key to surviving in this harsh world. And whereas our primitive ancestors relied upon a keen awareness of their natural surroundings, today's survival no longer depends upon following the caribou herds or being wary of huge predatory beasts. Now, until as recently as the 20th century, life in America was largely agricultural. It was spent mostly out of doors, still in close contact with nature and the cyclical patterns of the seasons. And I would say growing up maybe as late as the 70s or early 80s, children who are now mature adults spent much of their day playing outside in their yards, in neighborhoods, on farms, or in the woods. And in just one or two generations, however, childhood in America, as well as in other countries, has changed significantly. Population growth, smaller backyards, regulations of neighborhoods, playgrounds, parks, fewer wild spaces, electronic forms of entertainment, protective parents, they've all contributed to creating a different type of experience for children today. Instead, today's children are somewhat containerized. They're in playpens, they're in bouncy seats, they're in car seats, they're in strollers. They're driven in cars to and from school, and they're spending a lot more time indoors in general. The research that's been conducted on the effects of contact with nature by physicians, educators, psychologists, sociologists, and others have all discovered there are many benefits in nature immersion, as well as detriments to our health and well-being from nature deficit disorder. So, each generation experiences its own environmental generational amnesia. The new generation does not know the previous state of the environment and comes to take the degraded condition of the earth for granted, as this is the pristine version of our earth. Over time and with succeeding generations, humankind has come to accept a seriously impacted natural world as the standard by which we will measure any future ecological damage, and completely out of touch with what a healthy ecosystem once was. So we need to remember, humankind's first prepared environment is the natural world. We can't separate ourselves from it. We're part and parcel of it. And Margaret Stevenson used this description, first prepared environment. And, she is a student of Montessori's, was a trainer of teachers at the Washington Montessori Institute. And she emphasized the importance of the first prepared environment. As Montessorians, we're always thinking about our prepared environments, right? Our Montessori classrooms are actually the second prepared environment. The classroom is designed with the assumption that children had hands-on experiences in the first prepared environment. And in Montessori's years in Sri Lanka with her son Mario, they shared many outdoor explorations and gardening experiences with the children in a beautiful garden environment. And so the children were first and foremost observers, hands-on participants, noticing all these different leaf shapes and, why does this plant look like this and not like that one? And then the naming and classification activities follow the initial direct contact with nature as, observers, participants, and admirers. So analysis was secondary to immersion with nature. Now, Montessori observed, and all Montessorians are aware of this, that children undergo distinct sensitive periods of development and basic human tendencies. And she included sensitive period for order, activity, movement, exploration, sensory development, language, mathematics. And, to those, we could certainly add a sensitive period for biophilia, love of nature. This just comes so naturally to young children. They just love animals, don't they? They're fascinated by the natural world. And then Howard Gardner, the developmental psychologist, in his work to define the multiple intelligences, he's identified what he calls his eighth intelligence, and he's coined it the naturalist intelligence. So people are recognizing how much this is just developmental in humans, that we have a love of nature. It's just, we come by it naturally, instinctively. It's a part and parcel of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And a critical part of children's development. Right. I think that that's the piece I want to underscore from this, is that Dr. Montessori was seeing children who were spending a large amount of time in nature. Mm-hmm. And so that I love that the analysis of nature was secondary to their observation and their really integration in the natural environment. And yet now we're in a place where we have to be really intentional about having children be connected with nature. And listeners, we're going to get there. We are going to talk about how you can do this in your classrooms, even how you might be able to incorporate this at home. But before we go there, I want to help all of you understand. Linda, can you share with us what are the signs that we are now suffering from nature deficit disorder?
Well, nature deficit disorder, unfortunately, is a self-inflicted ailment. Richard Lew, the author of Last Child in the Woods, would describe it in this way. He would say, we have diminished use of our senses. We have attention difficulties. We have higher rates of physical and emotional illnesses. And he felt like the disorder is not only something that can be detected in individuals, but it can be detected in families, in communities. And I think it's fair to say we can detect it overall in our society. Mm-hmm. Now, for instance, why? Why do we have these symptoms? I would say electronic entertainment is probably near the top of the list as a reason for why. Keeps children indoors. That's where the electric outlets are. That's where you charge everything, right? And the pristine natural world is also shrinking, making it harder to access it easily. Some families live in gray spaces. They live in parks, trees, natural areas. They're just not easily accessed. I remember a little girl, a kindergartner in my classroom. We were making little bird feeders that they could go home and hang in their trees in the winter time. And she said she enjoyed the activity very much. And then after making it, she said, so now what am I supposed to do with this? And I said, oh, you get to take it home and maybe hang it in a tree outside a window so you can watch the birds come and eat the seeds and feed in the cold weather. And she said, we don't have any trees where I live. So some families live in gray spaces and they're deprived of these experiences. The children don't know what a green space is. Sometimes also parents are fearful of allowing their children the same independence that they themselves had growing up. So, I mean, think about your childhood. You think about, when I think about my own childhood, I was outside unsupervised almost every day during good weather. After breakfast, I'd run outside, I'd climb trees, I'd eat cherries in the trees. I'd creep through my mom's garden and eat things out of her garden. I would jump across the creek. I'd find turtles and frogs. I'd climb trees some more. I didn't ever want to go inside, frankly. My mom couldn't get me to go inside to eat. And I would bet that most of us who grew up before there was a lot of fear about children being outside unsupervised had a similar childhood where you were outside most of the day. You came in when you were called for meals. But today, parents would feel like they were negligent, and maybe also there is a social stigma against them if their children are unsupervised or appear unsupervised. So it's changed a lot. So not that long ago, children were able to have that unstructured playtime in green spaces.
And I think just one of the things that I want to add here is that what's happening, and this is current research, what's happening as children are disconnected from nature is they're actually disconnected from their own spirit. Because when you're talking about all those things that you used to do, you not only were building a connection with nature, and what we know is that children who spend time in wild spaces become advocates for the planet. And we have to have advocates for our planet. Like, we need to all be aware and conscious of our planet and taking care of Mother Earth. And not only were you doing that, you were spending time in quiet and in solitude, and you had time for self-reflection and thinking rather than constantly having something be coming in, which is what happens with our electronics now. There's always input, and the child doesn't know how to have solitude. They don't know how to be quiet. They don't know how to think. I just read an article about thinking and how children aren't having the opportunity to think because there's not this quiet time built in. There's no downtime. There's all this input coming at them all the time. So we're not just talking about children having nature deficit disorder, and not that that's just, because I mean, you look at all the impacts of that, but that comes out of the fact that the child is not self-constructing in the same way because they don't have the opportunity to. And when we raise our children to be constantly entertained, they don't want to go outside anymore because that requires, like, think about how much you had to bring to your own life in those moments. You were making choices, you were keeping yourself safe. You had to pay attention to, pay attention to the guy down the street who everybody said, don't go near his house. I mean, there were things, we had our brains fully activated, and all the way on, our spirits were engaged in the world in a different way. And so when you're talking about this connection with nature, it fuels so much of who we are as people. And candidly, I think that's how we were designed. Like, when you hear the research about what happens to children when they're not engaged, it doesn't give them access to that part of themselves.
So besides all the points that you made, Tamara, and besides helping us to deal with the stressors in our built world, and there are many, in nature, there are biological elements that actually prove beneficial to our health. Phytoncides, for example, which is a mixture of natural chemicals, these are secreted, especially by evergreen trees. And there's also beneficial soil bacteria, and these seem to improve the efficacy of our immune systems. Exposure to nature seems to reduce ADHD, and it's actually the exposure to nature, especially unstructured playtime in nature, seems to be more effective than medications. It improves our emotional health. It controls our blood pressure. It controls aggression. It reduces allergies. And researchers have found that it seems to be a link to greater creativity, the use of the imagination. As you said, you need to entertain yourself, so you become more creative. And Richard Louv describes nature as providing lots of loose parts. There are trees, there are bushes to turn into a house. There are sticks that can be spoons for serving with. They can't, of course, become weapons, unfortunately, but leaves, rocks, all these loose parts actually inspire our creativity. And higher test scores. result from children having more time outside. Instead of keeping them inside to prepare for tests, what we need to do is have them outside more. And they found that test scores actually went up in the classrooms that had windows where they could see nature. They could see trees. If they had plants in the classroom, test scores went up. So we're so concerned about test scores all the time, aren't we? And we think that we have to deprive our children of this playtime. We should be giving them more playtime. Let's talk to Finland about this a little bit.
Their system seems to be working very well.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that has come up for me in my TIES master's program, as I've really oftentimes before I took the master's program, I would talk about centering the child. And one of the things that I've realized is, yes, in our schools, we must center the child. It's easy to get pulled to all these different areas. But what I'm really recognizing is that human beings cannot be the center of our thinking anymore. And we have to support our children in seeing the interconnectedness of all living things and bring our children's attention to the natural world. If we bring, and Montessori got this, right? She wanted us to do the cosmic education. She talks over and over about bringing the universe to the child to the universe, having the child have an awareness of the universe. So this is fundamental to what we do and our work. And it's one of those things that, I mean, I've been doing this a long time and I did not understand that as educators, such a big part of our work was to support the child in seeing the interconnectedness of the cosmos and the earth and the animals and nature and the plants and how it all comes together in this magnificent weaving we call the universe. And so one of the things that has come up for me in TIES is asking the question, how might we run our school communities and our classrooms as if the life in all things matters? How might we teach our children to do the same? How do we save humanity? Is it by decentering humanity, which I have to tell you, I'm starting to think it is, and teaching our children the value of all living things and the concept of cosmic purpose? And what if that is our big work in the world right now? And one of the things that I've really come to as I'm going through this experience, and it's just been so beautiful and so valuable, I'm looking now at the universe as really this experience of love. And I appreciate that, like, hurricanes don't feel like love and all of those things that Mother Nature, you know, the planet is responding to us. But what I'm recognizing is that there's this sense of love that really connects us and binds us and elevates us and teaches us. And love learns, love grows, love evolves. And is it possible, and this is the question I'm asking myself through the program, that the universe is ultimately love, and that we as humans as we as humans use, abuse, learn, and love on this planet, that the earth is actually responding to how we are treating the planet, and that it really is a framework of love. And Dr. Montessori told us, she said, of all these things, like she has these beautiful lectures, and she'd say, of all these things, love is the most potent. And I just, as I'm going through my own spirit, it's a spiritual process that I am in right now through the TIES program. I have to say, I think it's part of why I love it. But as I'm going through this, I'm understanding that love really has to be for all living things and really the universe as a whole. And then asking the question, how do we bring that to our children? How do we connect them in this way? So there you go.
Isn't That is probably the most important question. Well, Montessori's concept of cosmic education, and in that concept, which probably our elementary listeners, our elementary teacher listeners are more familiar with, cosmic education, the ultimate goal of cosmic education, Montessori herself said, is cosmic consciousness. Mm-hmm. And I think that cosmic consciousness is love. Mm-hmm. And it may very well be the most powerful force in the universe. Is love the source of gravity? What causes the attraction to the Earth or the planets in the solar system to stay together? Is it fundamentally love? How about the weak and strong nuclear forces in atoms? Is it love? One thing we know, we protect what we love, right? We protect our family, we protect our friends, our communities. And if we're to protect the Earth, we must begin with love for this planet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that so much. So, okay, so now this is the part that I know that when we hear from our listeners, they love this part of the podcast. Mm-hmm. We are going to dig into how our educators help heal our children and ultimately our society and our planet who are suffering from nature deficit disorder, right? I think we can look at globally now that this is an issue, not just for the United States. This is a global issue for our children and families and people. And so can you speak to that?
Well, I wish there were easy answers, because it's a big ask of us as educators to try to solve the issues that face the Earth and face our society and face our children. And we're constantly asking ourselves, how can we improve our own learning environments to better meet the needs of our students, right? And many of us are doing that. We are devoted to finding how we can do that, but we can't do it alone. The nature deficit that so many of our children are suffering from, it can't be fixed just in the classroom, even if we take our children out as much as we possibly can, because parents are children's first teachers. And like most school-related endeavors, we need the family support. So since the outdoor deficit also happens and probably begins at home, how do we create activities to include families in the solutions? So here are some suggestions. The way I approached it as an educator was, I felt like parent education was key. You have to be a team. You have to be working together. And many parents are probably unaware that their children are growing up with a nature deficit and its negative effects. And parents also need nurturing as they develop the skills to share nature with their children. Adults, both parents and educators, we are able to imbue a love for the natural world in the children. It is not hard to do because awe and wonder are contagious. So if the adults in the environment approach the natural world with awe and wonder, the children absorb that. It's the absorbent mind, folks, right? I recall when I was teaching primary, I used to be enthralled with a daily parade of Canada geese down the sidewalk or down the street just outside our classroom. Now, some people considered the Canada geese to be pests, but I would watch their little parade, which they would silently pad down the street, down the sidewalk. They seemed so noble. And so we would head out the door, perhaps for dismissal or to go play. And I'd see this little parade and I would stop and just go, oh. And we would just watch in stunned silence and admire the nobility of the Canada geese as they paraded down the sidewalk. So here are some inspiring words from The Sense of Wonder by Rachel Carson. This is one of my favorite books. This is the renowned environmentalist. So, quoting her, if a child is to keep alive their inborn sense of wonder, without any such gift from the fairies, they need the companionship of at least one adult who can share it, rediscovering with them the joy, excitement, and mystery of the world we live in. Parents often have a sense of inadequacy when confronted on the one hand with the eager, sensitive mind of a child, and on the other with a world of complex physical nature. I sincerely believe that for the child and for the parent seeking to guide them, it is not half so important to know as it is to feel. If facts are the seeds that later produce knowledge and wisdom, then the emotions and the impressions of the senses are the fertile soil in which the seeds must grow. The years of early childhood are the time to prepare the soil.
I need you to know that that's one of my favorite books. And I used to read it with my 6 years, and we'd go out for our 6-year seminar and put our feet in the grass and read sections of the book because it's so beautiful. I will note that so many of them were not comfortable taking their shoes off. It was really hard for them to put their feet in the grass, and that was part of our awakening of recognizing that we had to step straight into that. Thank you so much for sharing that quote. It's one of my favorites.
And I think it's important to note that parents may feel inadequate. They may feel like, if my child asks me what kind of bird that is and I don't know, then I'm failing them. I mean, I'm really not the right person for this job. No, you are the right person for the job. You can say, that's a beautiful bird. I really love, don't you love the red on its head? Don't you love that? Do you like that stubby little tail? Do you like that sound it's making? We can find out what it is. We'll look it up, and then we'll find out what its name is. It's okay to admit you don't know the answer to every question. My heaven, I did this in my classroom all the time. What a great question, and I don't know. How can we find out?
I love that. And I have to tell you, one of the gifts of ties, and I think I got this from Robin Wall Kimmerer's.
Mm-hmm.
If you all haven't listened to any of her material, she's fabulous. She wrote Braiding Sweetgrass. And one of the things she talks about is that we respect what we name, what we know the names of, and that oftentimes we can look in our backyard and we don't know the names of any of the birds. We don't know the names of the types of trees. And so we don't have that deep respect for those things that we can't name. And so she really recommends that we learn the names, like you just said, and we don't have to know them. It's part of our awakening and our discovery. And that has been my own experience. I can tell you that before I started paying attention, I knew the blue jays and I knew the crows, and those were the birds that I knew. And now I know we have a Carolina chickadee family and tufted titmouse, which we think is the funniest name for birds. And just, we have these, golden finches, and we know the names of these little creatures that share our world with us. And it's not any more our world than their world. We're sharing it. We're cohabitants. So I really appreciate that, and that people don't have to know that right away. Part of my own children's experience has been watching me have this experience of, oh my gosh, look at this whole new world we are getting to explore together. And so I just, and one of my favorite things to do on the weekend morning is to sit with a pair of binoculars on the couch and watch the birds for a bit outside. If it's nice out, we sit outside and up close and really, and I say to my girls, they're both teenagers, oh, you have to see this. Did you see this family? Mom, really? But they're like, oh, wait, what kind is that? And they really join in. So it's the modeling, it's the excitement for the beautiful geese that are walking down the street. And it's creating space for that for ourselves. And I think what I'd like to do towards the end is talk a little bit about some of the structures we've put in place at Greenspring to support our staff, because not every adult in a Montessori community or any school environment comes in with that connection to nature themselves. So how do we foster that for the people who are ultimately are sharing that with our children?
Right. Well, I'm going to share an anecdote about my primary classroom. I was doing research into children and nature at the time that I was teaching, decided that I needed to offer more opportunities for the children to be in the wildest spaces I could possibly find. Now, this is a public school. They didn't have the budget to make my priorities their priorities. My priorities would have been to knock out the walls, just have the outdoor space immediately available to every classroom. But they weren't buying it. So they had a built primary play space, which was metal, plastic, and wood chips for the most part. It was fenced in, it was secure. And so that was where our children were supposed to go and play. And being new to this environment, having taught in private Montessori settings, the rest of my career, where access to nature, natural spaces was fairly immediate, it wasn't here. But I found in one corner of the campus that there was an overgrown, neglected garden space that not many of the teachers actively used. It was also fenced in, but it was rather huge for a primary student. It would be considered, gigantic. There were raised garden spaces in it, raised beds, garden beds, and every classroom had its own space to grow things. And we had our own, and we had our own growing projects and such. But because it was unkempt, the corners had overgrown, and there were shrubs and weeds. Weeds are all relative, right? They're just things that grow where you don't want them to. So not really weeds, but things that were hard to identify, perhaps. There were trees. And I decided I would offer the children the choice of going to the regular playground or to the garden during their playtime. So not just during our gardening time, but also as a recess, an outdoor time. And increasingly, children just would shout, the garden, the garden. They wanted to go to the garden. They didn't want to go to the regular playground. In the garden, I noticed that they immediately turned into cheetahs and gorillas and all kinds of little wild animals, and children would start climbing into the lower branches of the trees. There weren't any really high branches they could reach. They were making homes out of the shrubs and living under the overhanging branches. They were running around on the little trails in the back of the garden, and they just seemed to have a wonderful time. They seemed to really be creative and use their imaginations in that space. That sometimes children would dig in our raised beds and they'd find a bug or an earthworm. Oh my gosh, if they found an earthworm. The kindergartners usually studied earthworms. And I remember the time that Sophia was digging in the garden and she found an earthworm. It practically took her breath away. She had the earthworm in her hands. And she told everybody, all the other kids, oh, I have an earthworm. She raised it up as though it were a goddess. Well, they're hermaphroditic, so goddess, right? And the whole group of them broke out into song. We had this earthworm song that I had taught them. And it was so stunning. I'll never forget the way I felt. I felt like their hearts grew this big that day. Mm-hmm. The love that they had for that earthworm and the respect for it. And they wanted to make sure it got very carefully back into the earth so it could do its work, because it had a cosmic task to make good soil for us. So
what a beautiful way to have the children experience like hands-on, concrete experience of what it means to take care of other creatures, to have awe and wonder for them, to love them, to bring that love, because that earthworm is doing us such a service.
Absolutely. It's so important.
How is it that we always think that these creatures are their job is to serve us, but how do we not serve them? How do we teach our children that it's a mutual relationship?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I wanted to pry into the minds of the children. They were always saying, let's go to the garden, let's go to the garden. I wanted to know, why were they choosing the garden now? I wondered if anybody could put it into words. So I asked this one little girl who was our resident wild child. Her hair was usually like this, and she loved the garden. So she was a kindergartner the day that I asked her. Her name was Socheet. And I said, so Socheet, why is it that the children are choosing the garden instead of the regular playground? I mean, I ask every day where they'd like to go. Do you want to go to the regular playground? Do you want to go to the garden for your free time? And she became very, very serious and quiet, and knitted her brow a little bit. And she looked at me and she said, almost breathlessly, she said, well, on the regular playground, there's nothing that's alive.
Wow. How astute.
The wisdom in that statement.
That's so, and that is the truth, right? And when we give them these other play spaces, there's nothing alive. Wow. I love that story. Well, I will share with you that we just had the experience. I just had a staff member share this with me, that we had, they were observing a toddler classroom, and it was a 2-year-old, 2-year-olds in the classroom, and one of our little people was not really using their words. And they were pretty quiet and not really that responsive. And then they were in the outdoor environment. That child went with the group out and with some of the children who opted to go outside. And this child went outside and ended up digging in the dirt, and like really digging in, just hands in the dirt. And they love to find the grubs, right? They're on the hunt for grubs, and they take care of them. And as soon as the child had their hands in the dirt for a couple minutes, they became so verbal. And this was somebody observing who didn't know the child deeply. So it was just this stark contrast of watching this one little person and how much putting their hands in the dirt, they were digging in the dirt, and all of a sudden their words came in, and they were able to communicate with their peers and adults in a completely different way. So and we don't know, every individual child is different, right? Every human being is different. So we don't know what it is going to be for each one, but we have to be paying attention to make sure that the children really have what they need. So do you want to share some of the other things you did with your classroom? I bet you have
Absolutely.
really good ones.
Besides encouraging these kinds of activities at home, gardening, caring for animals, care of the home environment, during parent education, I would share some of the things that we're going to connect the school home team. And so I would let them know that I was going to read a book called You Are a Star. It helps to create a sense of awe at our cosmic origins. It's a wonderful inspiration for dialogue about the universe. And I found it very appropriate for kindergartners. In fact, I mean, their minds were like, beautiful book, beautiful book. And then that helped to launch looking up at the sky. I feel like we don't look at the sky enough. This morning I saw a crescent moon and the star Regulus near it. Just out of happenstance, I looked up and there it was, and they're so beautiful together. We don't look up enough. So I was trying to figure out, how do we get our kids to look up? Now, our little kids, they don't need to look up so much from that, right? but still, as a society, we're always looking down, right, at our technology. But the sun, moon, stars, these were our first form of shared stories. Before technology, our ancestors had mythology inspired by the celestial bodies. And those stories held really great power. Our children still enjoy them. So I chose some constellations to teach them about that are easy to identify and that would inspire them to go out and look for them. I might have to modify some of the myths. Some of them get a little racy here and there. However, they really loved Orion, Canis Major, Ursa Major, Ursa Minor, Leo, Cassiopeia. They were very popular with the children. So I created, and this is not an original idea, actually comes from I Wonder What's Out There by Joanne Alex and Aileen Wolf. I created a drawstring bag out of a starry, magical looking fabric with a deep indigo satin lining. And inside there were several books on stars and planets, constellations, including the favorite, the Glow in the Dark Constellations book. There was a star chart, binoculars, a little hand-charged flashlight. And each week, out of a basket, we would choose a name randomly of one of the kindergartners who got to take it home for the week. And then they could share the star bag with their family. So then the parents should, when it was their turn to have it, the idea was they would find a good night that worked for them. And they would go out together in the yard when it was dark and look for constellations, have a stargazing night. And, in the end, they needed to return it so another child could have a turn. So there's a little checklist inside so they can make sure that all the items were returned to the bag for the next child. And I would get comments like, oh, last night, Miss Linda, I saw Orion. I love Orion's belt. That's how I noticed it. Or I saw Venus, the evening star. And I might comment like, well, I saw the evening star too. And I thought of you and wondered if you all were looking at the evening star. The magic and mystery of the night sky is just something that unites all of us. And to think that we could be looking at the moon or the evening star and our friends on another part of our planet could be looking at it at the same time. It's kind of exciting. Also, I wanted to have an activity. I create some motivations for families to do more things outside during the daytime. And so I remembered when we would take our family to national parks and we get those little junior ranger booklets and such that the children could use and, make them more observant about nature. And I thought, we need maybe something like that to inspire children to do more things in their neighborhoods, at home and in their neighborhoods, like observing the birds that come to their bird feeder or what little mammals are living in the trees. So using that for inspiration, I created something that I ended up calling the Junior Forest Ranger Neighborhood Projects booklet. And I put different kinds of things that children could do, like observing animals, wild animals in my neighborhood. What trees do I know? What insects have I seen? With a place to write about it. This was a kindergarten oriented thing, and it sometimes would require a little parent help. That was the idea, that they were doing it with their families. Place to draw and color a picture. But there was also a place for them to do service, stewardship of the environment, like do recycling, be in charge of turning off the unused lights in our house today. And I chose to keep the name Ranger in there because I thought it would evoke that sense of inner hero within the children. Children love to be heroes. Mm-hmm. They love to love things. They love to help things. And so I felt like that name would inspire them and promote stewardship of the earth. So this is an optional project for my kindergartners, but they all loved doing them. And then, as an extension of that, and similar to the star bag, I created something called the hiking backpack. I think I have a page about that in the back here. And the hiking backpack had several things in it, like books, guidebooks for birds, trees, rocks, that kind of thing. Hand lens, binoculars, a first aid kit. and children could sign out one of the hiking backpacks. I had a couple. And then take it home for a week and take their families for a hike. So these are some ways to try to bridge classroom and home and get everybody involved in enjoying nature together.
It's such a beautiful idea, and I love the idea of actually providing that. It's almost, you're incentivizing them going out and using, they have a week, right? They have a amount of time and they can fit it in that week.
It makes it easier.
The child wants, it's a part of the child's education, their self-expression, their ownership, their autonomy. I've never heard those ideas. I think those are great ideas. Great ideas.
Well, thank you. And, the star bag and the hiking backpack were, I used those with lower elementary children as well at our school. So they also enjoyed them very much. So I think it's very age appropriate. I didn't have a chance to try something like, the Ranger program with that age group. I only had a chance to try that with kindergartners who loved doing it and would often come in and tell me, what they did. Or we found a new bird, or yesterday I did recycling at our house. I was in charge.
That's right. What a beautiful way to also have them be contributing at home, which is a critical component. Now, these are children who have access to the outdoors on more, that they have maybe wild animals in their neighborhood. Any thoughts on how we could adapt this for those who are living maybe in a city, or as you call it, a gray area? Like, how do we support those children? Because we do have Montessori schools that are in very urban areas that are, their playground is up on the roof of the building.
Right. Oh, gray spaces are a very difficult problem to address, aren't they? As a society, communities need to address that. We need to have at least small green spaces available. And I think we're seeing a proliferation of them. It depends on where you live. Some urban areas are doing a better job of addressing that than others. But sometimes, vacant lots are being purchased, for urban gardens, or to turn them into small green spaces. I've seen that even in my little community of Evergreen. A building was damaged and torn down. It got turned into a little community garden area and green space. So I think we need to address that as communities with families who were in gray spaces while I was still teaching. I would let them know that if your child has the star bag, you might want to try to set aside time to drive up to Red Rocks on a dark night and go someplace out of town so that you can see the stars better. So I would encourage families to try to find those spaces. I live near Denver, and Denver has a lot of green spaces, a lot of open space parks and such. So it doesn't take a very long trip to get out of town and find those spaces. But you're right, it is just definitely a very stubborn problem that we have.
Well, and it's another obstacle, and there are a lot of organizations working on that. REI has Outside in 5 that they're working, and they're really trying to support, and it's work that I support as well. But I just was curious because that's definitely a piece for some of our folks. I did want to just share that one of the things we've really taken this on this year in a new way, and no small part thanks to ties at Greenspring Montessori, where I'm the head of school. And we one of the things that we really recognized is that our staff needed the opportunity to build their own connection with nature. And in order for them to be able to support the children, we had to really support them. And so we did a number of things like during staff weeks, and then we continue in our PD throughout the year. And it is not as hard as it sounds. I felt very confronted by this as an administrator for a long time. And it really is as simple as during our back to school, we did some activities such as going out and doing a sensory scavenger hunt, and where we asked our staff to go out and find something that had an interesting sound, something that that you could eat on campus, which we do have, the taste, sight, all of those pieces, something interesting to touch. And it doesn't take very long. It really doesn't take very long. And it's been so interesting to watch how lit up people come back, even people who say, I'm not really a nature person. And they're so excited by these experiences. We did a scavenger hunt where they had to find or take pictures of different things. We had an activity provided by one of our, we had a visiting person come in to do some PD. That's continuing, but having everybody close their eyes, and then they get an object from nature in a small group, and they feel it, and they smell it, and they experience it, and then they pass it to the next person with their eyes closed. All of these are things that children can easily do as well. And it's really has been amazing to watch our staff become more and more connected with their own need for connection with nature. And also that it doesn't have to be that you're going out for a 5-day backpacking trip, right? It can be in these small moments. It can be making sure that the school community has, as much as possible, places in nature for people to have solitude and quiet, and we've implemented sit spots in our outdoor environments. And we asked our staff to do sit spots right from the beginning and do some journaling while they're doing a sit spot. Again, they come back their buckets are so filled from these experiences. And I just wanted to add that. So if you're an administrator listening to this and it feels like really big and daunting, we can take small steps. We can support that connection with nature with our staff that then helps them, because every educator I know understands that children need to be connected with nature, but they're not always sure what those steps are, and because they may not have that connection themselves. And so fostering that and making sure that the adult gets to have the opportunity for awe and wonder and pausing and learning the names of the creatures in your campus, around your house. We've started, actually, we just started this. I can't tell you how it's going to go, but we're on a 7-acre campus. So we're really lucky to have a lot of space, and we have a lot of green space. So every staff member has selected one living thing that lives on campus. So right now we have poison ivy, and we have dogwood trees, and we have red fox, and so we've selected, and they've all selected one of these things, and they're doing research on that one item. And we're taking a wall in our community, and we're going to put up because right now we've gotten about 5 or 6 so far. We're putting them all up with all this information. And as each one comes in, we all read it, right? So we're getting educated one comes in about a week, right? So it's not too overwhelming. But then the children in our elementary program's job is going to be to connect the different living things on campus. And we're calling it our Life at Greenspring wall, where we're really looking to help the children understand how interconnected our ecosystems are, and even our campus ecosystem, and that the birds eat those seeds from that tree, and like, and we're going to use yarn and connect them, and have the children use note cards and write out what the connections are, and they may have something that's connected with 6 or 7 different things, and really trying to support the children's understanding of that web of life, as well as our own as adults, because everything that we're learning, everything that we're doing it's not just for children, right? It's for all of us. And so I just wanted to share that we are, in no small part thanks to ties. I've always had a deep love for nature, but I haven't known how to bring it into the community. And we've had outdoor environments, and now our outdoor environment folks who supervise that are called naturalists, and we're really embracing and working to make it a part of the fabric of our school community. And it's just one step at a time. It's one little step at a time. So anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
I so admire what you're doing at Greenspring. It's just beautiful. And that wall, any school could do that.
Any school can do that.
You don't have to have 7 acres of woods to be able to do that. I think about the public school that I worked at, and there were quite a variety of trees. And, we were looking at doing some kind of identification. Should we have labels on the different trees? Should we have someone come and help us identify the ones that we're stuck on? So I just think that that's possible, even in a more limited natural environment.
Mm-hmm.
And then making all the connections, because that's where it's at. There are all these interconnections, and we're so interdependent on each other. It's to highlight that is just beautiful.
It's so beautiful. And I will say I think it's our upper L. I had nothing to do with this, but created a field guide of the creatures and the life from campus. And it really it's become a part of the community and a resource. And so they got to actually have the experience of their research really being important in the community. And so anyway, so there's so many things we could talk about here. I know we're pushing up on an hour, so we do have to wrap up, but gosh, what a wonderful conversation. I'm so profoundly grateful to you for this conversation, for giving us so much depth in such a short amount of time, for being inspiring to all of us. I just want to say thank you for your deep commitment and really the longevity of your commitment to this work.
Well, thank you, Tamara, for this opportunity to share what I feel is of critical importance. It's just a very important message for both educators and parents.
Yeah. Well, I could not agree more. I think it's one of our most important topics. And so I just thank you. And I just want to also take a moment to thank our listeners. We appreciate you spending your time with us today. Take a look at our website at greenspringcenter.org to view the show notes from today's episodes. And I want you to know that we will include the ties link to where Linda is one of the professors on our show notes as well. So if you want more information, I promise you they are not paying me. I just love the program, and I really believe in it. It's been transformative, which is what I think education should provide. So we'll include that as well. We also invite you to subscribe to our podcast to hear the latest episodes and join in the conversation on Facebook and Instagram. The truth is, the work you do is so important, and you are not in it alone. We are absolutely better together. Join us next time.